In this tutorial series, we'll be going through MetaSounds node by node for the Unreal Engine, learning how to go from beginner to complicated in game-driven sounds and procedurally generated music. Today we're going to talk about the trigger compare nodes for float, bool, and integer. We're going to use the integer one, but the other two work identically to it. And you can use them based off what kind of value you need to compare, whether it's a bool, a float, or a integer. What we're going to do is we're going to use the integer compare float, and it's a great way to introduce some sorts of flow control. There's multiple ways to change whether or not a trigger is going to pass, and this is a very simple way to do that. And it's great for music because you can use it to subdivide very evenly. So let's get started. First, this node right here, these nodes we've created, is something we've been making throughout this series of tutorials. So if you're interested in how to do that, you have to check out those tutorials. We're not going to cover that here. But essentially, we've created a heartbeat monitor that kind of triggers a new note on the beat every single time. So we're going to introduce some flow control with the trigger compare. And when you put in on trigger, every time the event happens, that the beat happens, it will compare these two values, A versus B, the way that you ask it to compare it. And then it will say true or false. So this is kind of a branch, specifically for integers. So we're going to say on comparison, A versus B, and if it's true, then continue. If it's false, it's not going to continue. You can actually do a whole nother node or whatever you want. You can have them both hooked up at the same time, but we're just going to hook up the true right now. And the way this works with trigger counter, as we've already covered in a previous tutorial, the trigger counter will count 1 through 16. Now it starts at 1, it doesn't start at 0. So using whole numbers, it'll count to 16 and then start back at 1. So what we can do is we can plug this in here, and then we can say 8, the halfway point, because we got the reset counting at 16. That's the only reason we know this, right? That it's going to count to 16. 8's half is 16, so at the halfway point, we're going to say if it's greater than or equal to, then continue on. So what this will do is it will give us a rest for the first 8 notes, and then it will play 8 notes, and then it will go back to resting 8 notes. For that one, I would actually just not need to do equal to, I just need to do greater than, and that will do it. And that is the trigger compare nodes. You can do the same thing with a bool or a float. This tutorial series is brought to you by my MetaSound Starter Pack. If you're looking for more complicated examples on how to utilize procedurally generated music and game-driven sounds inside of your projects, you might want to give it a look. More details in the description below. This is Space Dodo, where we talk about games and game development.